Welcome to the discussion. My guests today are Pablo Stern, the Senior Vice President for IT Workflow Products at ServiceNow, Yemi Oshinaye, the Deputy Chief Information Officer for the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, Kashit Pandya, the Deputy CIO for IT Operations at the IRS. Welcome to the discussion. Let me set just a little bit of context for our conversation today. We've all heard the stories how COVID-19 has pushed digital transformation to the forefront over the past year. Many agencies were forced to speed up the delivery of online services by innovating through the cloud, especially through software as a service. Over the last year, we've had some agencies who started to reconsider their modernization roadmaps, adjust their plans to meet more pressing and immediate demands to support that virtual workforce. While we saw other agencies whose network, cybersecurity, collaboration, tool investments in previous years actually put them in a relatively good position to address the significant and sudden changes that their employees had to face in their work environments. No matter where agencies started, all must continue to optimize their networks, their services, and use the data as the driving force behind those efforts. This will lead to improving citizen and customer user experiences. It will mean taking advantage of artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies. And it will mean operational resilience because the cloud and the as-a-service model will ensure employees can work from anywhere at any time. So with that context in place, let's turn to the panelists. Yeah, Yemi, let me start with you. Digital transformation strategy over the last year, it's probably evolved a little bit for USCIS. You guys were a big cloud users. You guys were a big DevOps user. Walk me through what has changed over the past year.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think that's a great question, Jason. For us, really, it was about execution. We took a really good hard look a couple years ago and invested in, better networks, invested in getting 365, really invested in looking at our value stream and making sure we can do a lot of things because, we've been kind of inundated with paper for years and we're trying to get out of the paper game. So we pushed the envelope on digital, and very fortunately, we just happen to be in this position when everything hit that we can now execute. So there are some things we did faster than others, like we're doing video interviews to have social distancing because of COVID. We were able to take workloads that normally we've done in one office and do them in different offices, but those capabilities were there because we started investing in them. And then we said, hey guys, instead of waiting, it's just time to test these things out. So I think a lot of that really good preparation came in handy for us.
How often were you saying, this is new, we got to launch it because of the pandemic versus, well, let's test it longer, let's wait and see? Like that urgency that I've heard many times from people in your position has really driven the changes. But were you going to launch in 6 months and instead you launched in 1 month type of change, or was it as the need came up, you pushed it out?
It was a little bit of both. I could tell you our 365 journey was one that, we were moving away from the enterprise outlook the way we had it, and we're moving towards 365 and then Teams and things like that. But as the pandemic hit, we said, well, I think video conferencing through Teams is going to be really important. Let's start doing it and testing it out. Let's send everybody home before we all had to go home to see what the network would be like. And so instead of putting the dollars to it, a month or two later, we said, let's do it now. And then when we found ourselves in a situation that we needed, software to help workloads for adjudication move around, we said, well, we knew that existed, but we just never did it. So let's just do it now. So we kind of accelerated. I wouldn't say it was 6 months to 1 month, but kind of like there's 3 months to let's do it today. And the fortunate thing is we could just flip a switch. And so that was really good to see.
Looking back now, probably the best thing that agencies did was that test. When I remember back in January, February timeframe 2020, when the Office of the Federal CIO had asked for that test, it was very hush hush. That really set everybody up for success in many ways. Kashit, let's talk about the IRS. You guys are on a never-ending evolution of digital transformation. How has things changed over the past year for the IRS?
Thanks, Jason. Our response echoes and it's very similar to what Yemi has raised as well. There was a urgency and a priority placed on transforming ourselves from a digital perspective. So as we realized that more and more of our workforce was now going to be remote, we had to continue to identify how best to improve that user experience. And that ranged from everything from expanding our users' ability to remotely log in. We had, about 25,000 or so people dialing in or remotely dialing in. We had to increase that capacity to nearly 90,000. we had to invest much more heavily in our network infrastructure to be able to accommodate not just those connections, but the ability for our users to be able to have a quote unquote normal functioning experience, right? Which includes video conferencing, which includes multiple video conferences across the board, in addition to audio conferencing. So we had to invest in that. We had to invest in deploy solutions faster. You asked Yemi about, did we go from 6 months to 3 months? We did actually end up having to deploy faster. We had plans for execution and deployment that were probably, I would say, 9 to 12 months out. But because of where we found ourselves in March 2020, that timeline shrunk from 12 months to 2 months, and sometimes, less than that. And we reacted, and we did so by just being a little less risk averse. We said, let's deploy, let's execute, and then we'll iterate on what we've executed rather than continue this planning and analysis stage. So it really did require us to accelerate everything in the digital front, and ensure that the experience wasn't, I would say, ruined by any infrastructure, right? So we had to make the right investments and do it faster than we ever did before.
I think that's a great example of one going from a potential 12-month plan to 2 months. I think that shows what anyone can get done, specifically in the government, who sometimes gets a bad rep. Was that a matter of, and I'm going to buzz you, I'm going to give you a little bit of buzzword here, MVP, you got the minimal viable product out and then you iterated, or did you have, like what Yemi was talking about, we were already on the path for 365 and we just turned all the switches up?
No, that's a great question. It really was, to your point, the first point, MVP. We work through the requirements, whether it's for an IT requirement or a business partner's requirement. We typically work through the requirements and try to deliver the full package, in one fell swoop. We realized that we needed to deploy something faster, and that tended to include what is the base capability that is required immediately. And then we can enhance and build on what that base capability can provide. But right off the bat, it was, let's get the minimal viable product out. We'll iterate, we'll come out with version 2, version 3, version 4, whatever is necessary. But those are enhancements as opposed to what is the immediate need. So it really was much more of deploy out-of-box solutions, deploy the minimal viable product, and then build and iterate.
We'll talk later in the program about some of these capabilities and how you kind of shifted that culture. But let me bring Pablo in from ServiceNow. One of the things about this, what you heard from Yemi and from Kashit, is not uncommon, I imagine, from what you've heard from your customers. First of all, let's react to what Yemi and Kashit were saying, and then broaden out to what you saw more broad to what you saw across the government over the last year.
Sure. If you think about it, like, digital transformation is really about unlocking productivity. And what Kashit said is absolutely right. We're hearing this from tons of our customers, which is it's about getting those great experiences to your employees, to citizens, to your customers. And really what we've seen in the pandemic is we have to meet people where they are. And at the core, this is about the flow of work. And today, a lot of that is still very manual. There's a lot of friction. And I think one of the things that we've heard from a lot of folks in technology leadership roles is that is somewhat manual. That friction is really making people get caught flat-footed. And I was reassured to hear Yemi say, look, they actually started some of their digital initiatives early. And so it actually set them up in a good place to go and really tackle the pandemic when everybody was basically required to work from home, and you really changed the landscape. But really what we've seen from our customers, broadly speaking, is there's been really an acceleration in those digital initiatives. So I was talking to a customer in the private sector who said, look, our budgets aren't changing tremendously, but what we are doing is we're actually going and over-investing in these digital initiatives, and we're actually cutting our costs on infrastructure side, on places where we can go and find some hard dollar savings, because we've realized that we really need to be able to do that to be competitive and to really deliver the services and the experiences that our employees and customers and citizens need.
I want to delve into that idea more about understanding where to cut and where to reinvest. I'm not sure how much you can tell us more about that customer, but in the private sector, obviously it's easier, but it's not something that agencies can't do themselves. I mean, with working capital funds and other approaches, does that conversation come up that, hey, if we could kind of move money, shift money, save, and then reinvest? Pablo, what are you hearing?
Yeah, absolutely. And we see this a lot actually with the agencies we work with, like hard dollar savings around, what are the assets that you have? What are the licenses that you have for software licenses? And how are those actually being utilized amongst your employee base? I mean, we've seen customers that have saved millions of dollars by being able to go and really figure out like what is being used, where meeting the employees where they are, and then using those dollars to invest them in some of the digital initiatives. So it transcends both. The reality is that as you shift to cloud, there are opportunities to drive efficiency. As Kashit was talking about, as you get to deliver faster pace of innovation ultimately delivers more productivity and more efficiency. And so there are some soft savings that you can see in some of those transitions as well. One of the core things that we've seen from a lot of our customers is focusing the employees on higher value work. So if you can take things like a password reset call into support or VPN issue and push that out through self-service to a virtual agent, then that actually lets you focus your teams on things that are more important, more valuable, and ultimately drives better overall efficiency and productivity for your organization.
Kashit, you're shaking your head there a little bit to what Pablo was saying. Jump in a little bit and talk a little bit about your how IRS has maybe shifted some costs or at least drove some efficiencies.
Absolutely. I was shaking my head because I was relating to what Pablo was saying. Our budgets weren't exponentially increased just because we had this need and urgency to deploy more in addition to what we were already working to implement and deploy. We had to figure out how best to reprioritize and use the existing budget we had. One of the areas we were taking a hard look at is reducing IT footprint. And that encompasses multiple initiatives and effort within it, everything from migrating to cloud, to decommissioning our legacy environments, to leveraging AI robotics where possible. To Pablo's point, how can we ensure that our teams are doing the high value work rather than what they have been inundated with, which can be pushed out through self-service, through automation. We have focused a lot more on trying to consolidate our, everything from our tools inventory to reducing the number of applications we are using through portfolio rationalizations. It really is, how do we shift the funding that we currently have and put it more towards innovation and modernization rather than continuing to expand in the way we had previously, which ultimately leads to higher O&M costs, right? So it's reduce the O&M costs so that the ratio of the O&M budget against the, I'd say modernization and other new initiative budget now shifts in the favor of modernization and innovation. So it is reprioritizing to reduce O&M to therefore by doing so increasing the ability to modernize.
Kashit, I'm going to nerd out with you for a second, if you don't mind, because this is one of my favorite topics. I'm still looking forward to the federal IT dashboard update whenever it happens about the shift from O&M to DME. I think that for years we've talked about this. Yemi knows what I'm talking about. Agencies, 80% of their IT budget on O&M. I think we're going to see a shift. I wouldn't be surprised if across the board we see it down to 75, 72%, maybe even lower. Yemi, jump in a little bit. You don't have to maybe comment on that specifically, but how is USCIS also addressing that DME O&M shifting because of the urgency of the pandemic?
Yeah, I'm gonna kind of stitch some of what Pablo and Kashit said together. I mean, looking at budgets and looking at our operating environment is like a constant thing. It's no longer that you look at a budget at one time of the year. We're looking at workloads. How much is a workload in a data center versus in the cloud? And even honestly, when you get to the cloud, it's optimize, optimize, optimize. How do I optimize my workload so I get more out of each VM? And then that goes back into savings so I can reinvest that saving into more automation. How can I get software out with the reduced amount of errors so that my software developers can work on strategies of building architecture? And then some of the cool things we get to do is we focus on just modernizing like our call center. We take things from tier 1 with warm handoffs to tier 2 with information so that the call center agents now can work more complex cases so we can help our clients, and then really have an adjudicator being able to facilitate their job. So it's like really multifaceted, but really on the O&M side, it's automation. I mean, to the hilt. We're trying to make sure that we automate so much that it's not about O&M. It's really about pushing the envelope of our environment so we can do more and increase that value stream. So it's a lot of work. IT is a contact sport, right?
Yeah, Jason, I want to jump in because I think something that Yemi talked about around these value streams, I think is really what we're seeing across our customer base, both agencies in government and private sector, which is what's happening is, and she hit on this a little bit, which is you're driving faster innovation, you're going across that entire value stream, but there's still a lot of swivel chair, there are a lot of different teams that are working through things, there are a lot of different tool chains that are being used across this. And as you're trying to get more lean, more agile, you're in this environment that's pretty hybrid because you still have your waterfall on-prem environments that are multi-tiered with these new applications that are in the digital space and that are breaking things, frankly, because you're going to MVP and you're moving fast. And so what we're really hearing from our customers is this need to kind of create a fabric, a digital fabric that interconnects these value streams across all the tool chains and all the disparate tools that exist, from your plan to build to operate to deliver that service. Because in the end, as a technology leader, you're going to be living in this hybrid world for time to be. And you want to make sure that your priorities are aligned to what the teams are doing, and you're enabling and empowering those teams to work in their tools of choice. But you're doing so in a way that's not only increasing the speed of innovation, but it's also assuring quality and governance and helping you reduce costs.
Plenty more to dig out from that. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we can continue our conversation. You're listening to the panel discussion, Government's Approach to Digital Transformation During COVID, sponsored by ServiceNow on Federal News Network.